Hey folks, it's Sam, and as you can see, I'm doing a case study on the ubiquitous Joe Rogan. He is everywhere these days doing his thing. You see here this graphic, we have Joe Rogan over here, case study. We're going to talk about what's next for him, and we happen to have a good birth time for him. We're going to look at his chart. We're going to see what's coming up next for him. Is he going to be kicked off of Spotify? Is he going to run for political office? What's going to happen with this guy? We have a good birth time. We're going to look at a few things here. You see, there's been a recent dust up with Neil Young ultimatum where Spotify kicked off Neil Young, but now we have some other artists who are saying, look, we don't want to be on the same platform with this guy. So what does that mean? And what's going to happen with him? So we're going to be talking about that today. Do a sort of quick case study here, but go deep into it. Now, I want you to please like and share and subscribe to the channel here. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can click the subscribe button, ring the bell to get notifications of videos like this. Also, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this on any of the other distribution networks. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or any of those platforms also, I really appreciate it. And when you do like and subscribe and leave a comment, it boosts the video in the algorithms as well. Sometimes people only leave comments to complain or to yell at me. If you like the video, let me know. Say that, wow, this was really good as well, because it really helps. I like to get good news, not just people arguing with me as well. And last thing, I did just want to also let people know that if you are interested in knowing about this year ahead for you, you can get your 2022 personal forecast. There's a link going at the bottom. Your 2022 VedicAstrology.com is where you can go. I put together a forecast for each of the 12 signs, including yours, where you can learn about the 10 most important shifts for your, for your sign, and really be prepared for the upcoming year. So go ahead and take advantage of that. So again, we're going to be talking about Rogan, case study. I'm going to be giving my views on him as well, and a few things like that. But we're going to be looking at his chart. My feeling about all of it, is just, it's like a lot of things now. What was once, reasonably okay, wasn't too bad, is now sort of getting out of hand. He was much less biased before. Now his stuff is getting more and more, again, it's just biased. It's not, my view, it's not just that he's having people on. I mean, it's fine to have people on. I don't have a problem even with him having on those doctors that he had, the Malone and McCullough, the recent ones where all the controversies happened. It's just that he's so biased now that it's hard to listen to it, especially if you're not biased, right? Which I'll talk about in a minute. But then he recently had on Jordan Peterson as well. Again, Jordan Peterson is okay. I like some of his stuff, his sort of libertarian views. But then he starts getting into climate change, climate denial, and just kind of going all over the place. Rogan has really lost a certain edge because he's so, he'll sit there and really grill other people, and then others he'll just let sort of say anything. And it's very clear now that he's just he's really really showing much more of a bias now, especially more than he used to. And so he's getting a lot of heat for it. This is why. It's not just that, again, people don't want the truth or whatever. It's just very obvious that he's really changed, even for someone like me who really liked a lot of his interviews before. They seemed quite fair, and he just seemed curious. It's really less and less that. It seems like since he got COVID, and then CNN and the media started running all the horse dewormer stuff, it really, kind of sent him off to one side. He's like, okay, if you're going to say this now, then I'm coming after you. And so this has really gotten him in trouble, you would say, with more, even people like myself who are interested in his interviews. I kind of liked him before. I mean, I liked him before. I was always interested. He would go the whole spectrum from not radical progressives, but to the progressive wing of like the Democratic Party, from like the, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks and the Jimmy Dores, and the, to like the right wing sort of commentators like the Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro and everything in between. And then he would also get into other stuff. It was just interesting to hear a guy sort of talk. But of course, now that everything has become collapsed around COVID, the only thing anybody can think about anymore, and he had his own experiences, and he's really just kind of, really polarized things. So I'm going to look at his chart here, and it's really obvious to see a few things. And we do have a good birth time for Rogan, and again, my views about him is that he's, um, his perspective has really changed. And for example, look at an interview that he did with Sanjay Gupta, the guy from CNN, and now he was just hammering on Sanjay Gupta from CNN, holding a task for everything. And then with these other doctors, the ones who he's very sympathetic to, the ones who want to get on and talk about how it's been a hoax or it's this or that, he just kind of lets them say anything. He doesn't push back on anything. And he kind of lays down the mat for them to like proclaim that, oh yeah, things were a conspiracy or this or that. He doesn't apply the same standard of, neutrality or tough quote journalism. And he can always kind of back off from that by saying, well, I'm just some comedian. Why should anybody listen to me? I'm just some dummy. Don't listen to me. But then he still defends his positions even when he gets things wrong. Very recently, also one of his guests really took him to task on something that he said that was wrong, right, in real time. And for a couple of days, Rogan was apologetic. But then a couple of days later, once he found some confirmation bias and people to say, oh no, he wasn't wrong, then he just amplified that message. It's like, well, I guess I wasn't wrong after all. So he's not that kind of neutral arbiter that he was that he was before, when he was really just seemingly curious and asking questions and not really so hyper, I don't want to say partisan because it's not really political, but just sort of hyper biased, where he's now really just kind of putting out one side. And of course, that's done is now, recently Neil Young, the famous musician, came out and said, I want my music taken off of Spotify if you're going to just amplify this guy's voice. And by the way, I don't really have an opinion about that. I can see Neil Young's perspective. He doesn't want to share a platform where the main kind of star quote of that platform is really the kind of leading voice now in really what you would call misinformation, or at least biased information. So Neil Young said, I don't want to be on that same platform. If this is your main guy, this is the guy you're behind. So if you're going to have him, then take me off. I don't think Neil Young thought for 1 minute they were going to kick Joe Rogan off in favor of him. But what it's really done is it could show a real cascading effect. Joni Mitchell has now come out and said the same thing. Now, again, we can roll our eyes now and go, huh, Neil Young, well, you make them choose between you and Joe Rogan. Well, they chose Joe Rogan. Ha ha. You're old and irrelevant anyway. Okay, well, what about Joni Mitchell? Okay, what if it continues? What if Paul McCartney comes out and says it? What if Led Zeppelin? What if all these musicians? What if, how many of them are going to come out before Spotify says, well, maybe it's not worth it for us to keep Joe Rogan on the platform? And these are the kinds of things we're going to be talking about here, because again, you could say, well, they're behind Joe Rogan, they're behind him now. But again, we've had two major defections. Neil Young and Joni Mitchell are very popular, particularly amongst a certain cohort. And again, this kind of backlash against against the damage that having this kind of messaging, being put out there, this is the kind of pressure that these companies now are having to deal with. We're living in this world, and it's all just free market capitalism. No one's doing anything wrong. Spotify is fine. I'm very libertarian about this stuff, to be honest with you. Spotify has the right to have Joe Rogan on there. Joe Rogan has the right to say all this stuff. Neil Young has the right to say, well, then take me off. And all these other artists also have the right to take him off. And then I think eventually Spotify, and I'm just going to tell you, I'll just, rather than bury the lead, I'm just going to say right now, I think eventually they are going to take him off, because I think this isn't the beginning. I don't think this is the end. I think it's the beginning. I think you're going to see more artists. In fact, I think pretty much many conscientious artists are going to come out and say this now. And I think it's going to be hard for them to keep Joe Rogan on. And I don't think it's going to be It's not censorship and all this stuff. That's not what drives it. You know what drives it? The same thing that drives everything, money. And so let's look at Rogan's chart and we can see this. So again, this is his chart here. He's got this Taurus ascendant, and we do have a good birth time. It's a rod on Astro Data Bank. It's like a Rodden rating A or double A or something, where literally it was confirmed by him to an astrologer, I think. And so this is a legitimate time, August 11th, 1967, at 5 minutes after midnight. And this is a Taurus ascendant, and we have Moon K2 Moon K2 Mars in the 6th house in Libra, Rahu in the 12th, Saturn in the 11th house, very ambitious, Mercury, Jupiter, Sun in the 3rd house, a lot of interest, curiosity, Venus in the 4th house in Leo. And you see, here's this chart. These are the dashas. I just went back and looked a little bit. To be honest with you, I didn't really know anything about Rogan in the past, except that I was just surprised to find out. I just looked a little bit that he was on TV show. His first big kind of thing was a TV show like in the mid 90s called News Radio, which had that was the first time he really kind of penetrated into the culture. And then he was a game show host of like Fear Factor 2001. You could see this was, the talk radio or whatever was here in the middle of Jupiter dasha, but then it was really since the Saturn dasha that he really blew up, which makes sense because Saturn is the Yogacaraka planet for Taurus, right? It's the 9th and 10th house ruler here. And again, so Saturn is that Raja Yogacaraka for a Taurus person, and it's in the 11th house aspecting the ascendant. It's not really tight by orb, but it's still aspecting the 1st house there. And so you could see how that Saturn dasha has really been a time of major success. And again, I don't really know because I create a lot more media than I follow, for lack of a better way to put it. So I don't really know exactly when he became so popular, but it's, at least within the last, 5 years or so, it's just increased. And his deal with Spotify was it was really finalized, and it was August of Spotify strikes deal with Joe Rogan, May of 2020, and then May of 2020. And again, so that would have been right before Saturn Jupiter was when it started. So since his Saturn Jupiter, like May of 2020, and I think it was September 1st was when it was exclusive to Spotify. So exclusive to Spotify started since this last cycle that he's in, and he's in Saturn Jupiter now. And again, since Saturn Jupiter, that's when he's been in the height of his power, right? And again, because Saturn is this Yogacaraka and it's Saturn Jupiter. Jupiter is the ruler of the Saturn. In the natal chart, Jupiter is in the exaltation sign, right? It's very powerfully disposed, and it's also very combust. Now you might say, oh, combustion bad. Anybody who's studied with me knows I've said over and over and over again that combustion is not bad for worldly results. In fact, it amplifies the power of the planet because it's behind the sun. In fact, I even just talked about it here recently, with the Saturn combustion that we're experiencing now. And I even said that when the planet's behind the sun like this, like his Jupiter is combust, then it means it was far away from the Earth. So the rays of Jupiter was coming through the sun, and the sun was amplifying and powering it and purifying it. So Rogan, aside from being a comedian and all that, or celebrity personality, talk show guy, he is into, mixed martial arts and fighting and that kind of stuff. And again, this is very, masculine kind of energy. Sun, Jupiter, Mars, you see he's got K2 Mars. Again, even Jupiter as well, because especially in this case, because Jupiter is the ruler of Saturn, and Jupiter definitely gives a person that kind of purpose and that purposeful hope And like I say, it's sort of like a purification. So a lot of the things that happen with someone getting big and getting strong in this regard, there's a lot of sort of purification that goes on, particularly with these combust planets. The other thing to know is that this Jupiter aspects this Saturn to a pretty tight degree. So again, Jupiter Saturn dasha, Saturn Jupiter dasha, which is what he's been in since the middle of 2020. Again, he signed the deal with Spotify right before it, May of 2020, but then he actually switched over exclusively to the platform in September of 2020. So the whole time he's been on Spotify, he's been in Saturn Jupiter. And you see, that's the transition point into Mercury dasha, right? So something else happened in September of 2020. And you watch this chart over here, because this is the transit chart. We'll go back. This is January 2022. You watch, we're going to go back to September 2020. Something big happened then. And look at what it is. Rahu, September 6, 2020. By the next month, look at where Rahu is. Goes into his first house. So Rahu, right after he went into Spotify, Rahu went onto his first house at that time. And again, so you see these things coming together, as astrology always shows, that this sort of correspondence between Saturn, Jupiter, and all of that power with this exalted Jupiter aspecting Saturn. Jupiter is also the ruler of Saturn, ruler of the 11th house. And we'll also look at the D10 in a second, because that also really shows why Saturn Jupiter is so powerful. But you can see it also corresponds with the transit, especially of Rahu going into his first house. And understand, this isn't just a normal Rahu. This is an exalted Rahu. And by transit, and again, those who know me know what I say the reason Rahu is exalted in Taurus is because it really stabilizes that unstable end of the node. So again, having this exalted planet go through your first house, particularly for anything worldly and lustful and desirous and big things, Rahu is the kingmaker. Rahu in this transit through his first house has literally kind of made him the king. I mean, he's the king of all media. I mean, Joe Rogan has more listeners in his podcast than like any of the news shows, any of the news programs. He's like definitely the biggest influencer on the planet right now. I mean, this is why it's important. This is why it's, he's what he does now and what he says is, so important. And it's one of those things. Be careful for the success that you want. Be careful for what you want, because you might get it. And, I think Joe Rogan just wants to go back to being a kind of pothead goofball that people like to listen to. But, he's even said, why does everybody listen to me? I'm just some comedian or whatever. I mean, and then he wants to negate himself when it's convenient, but then he wants to tell the world what's wrong with the world, tell the world what's wrong with itself. And then when the blowback comes back and people say you're being a dope, you're being an idiot, he's like, well, why are you listening to me? Well, why are you talking? Stop talking about things you don't understand, and nobody's going to give you a hard time. Again, it's always the problem with the ego. It's always the same problem. Again, you want the benefit of your power, but you don't want the responsibility of it, right? And again, I want to be very clear. I actually think Joe Rogan underneath it all is probably a very decent guy. And I think by the way, I think he's lost, and I'm going to be telling you, this is why. This Rahu going through the first is like, Rahu is confusing. And he's like, what? I'm doing the same thing I've always done. Yeah, but now times are different. You have more influence. Your platform is bigger, and you're sticking your nose in things now that can be very injurious to people. Again, you're not just having conversations. Can't we just ask questions? I'm just asking questions. You want to be the kind of pothead just asking questions in your, the popular pothead asking questions with no responsibility. But again, that's not your place anymore. Again, and you can't just shirk that responsibility. And also, again, he could do it. He could still do it if he hadn't lost his way. in this context. This is what I mean also about he was doing that much more authentically before. But I think, honestly, I think what happened is when he got the COVID, and then especially because he's talked about it so much, like it's a thorn in his side, CNN running those, headlines, horse dewormer and all this. And by the way, it was wrong, and CNN, came out and apologized for it. But then they kept, they were back to saying the same thing over and over again. Not here to defend CNN or defend the news for running that. There was no reason to run the horse dewormer thing. They kept doing it because they wanted to delegitimize ivermectin. But part of that is because it had been overstated as well. But again, that's not the job of the news. So I don't want this video to be a critique of the news. I'm just pointing this out as the moment where I think he just kind of flipped a little bit. And he's like, oh, you're going to do that? And because you could see him, he was really angry about that. He really kind of lost his, hey, I'm just asking questions stuff. And okay, people say this, but it's like every time since then, again, he got like that Dr. Gupta on there and he was just pummeling him, with like, well, why aren't you calling him out? Why aren't you saying on air they're wrong? But you're the medical guy over there. Why aren't you coming out saying they're wrong? Why, And the guy admitted, he's like, yeah, it was wrong. But let's talk about the thing now. Okay, yeah, but it's wrong. But why aren't you saying it? Did you call him out on it? Are you saying it now? Are you saying how wrong they were? Like he was just pinning him to the mat, beating him up over it. But these other guys, particularly like with when he had McCullough on, there's all kinds of stuff where he's trying to get the guy McCullough to admit that all of it was a conspiracy about Trump. And when Malone came on, he's acting like, hey, I don't know why they're saying all this stuff about you. They're just saying a bunch of stuff that's not true, and like he didn't call any of these guys on some of the very questionable stuff. Now, again, it doesn't mean you can't still have them on and have conversations, but when he's unwilling to even be reasonably skeptical or push back at all with those other guys, then it just really shows this bias. And that's the thing that I noticed because I watched those interviews. I'm very interested in what they had to say. And some of it was obvious, some of it was known. It wasn't big bombshells, frankly. But the thing that I noticed so much was just how dying Rogan was to get McCullough to admit that the reason they didn't pursue hydrochloroquine is because Trump had mentioned it. So they were just doing it to get back at Trump and this kind of thing. So we kept baiting him to try to admit to that. And then it was all very Trump sympathetic after that. Malone the same way, acting like, oh, why are all these medical professionals against you? It's not like you've done anything. It's not like they ever it's not like they ever tell you why. When there's 100 reasons why Malone has things in his background. One is coming out claiming that he invented the mRNA technology, his exaggerations about that. So again, if he's exaggerating about that, what else is he exaggerating about? Now, again, it doesn't mean that Rogan has to pummel him to death over, but you could bring it up, you could mention it and let him defend it or something. But like Rogan wouldn't go there at all with any of that. Like he's not pushing back at all on any of that stuff. So again, I think he just kind of got really sideways. And this is as Rahu was going through the first house. So again, I'm just pointing out some of this background because I guess that happened sometime around this time. When did Rogan get COVID? Let me just look it up really quick. Rogan got COVID. It was sometime in the summer, I think. Rogan said he got COVID and has taken the drug. Yeah, that was September 1st. Okay. September 1st, Rogan said he got COVID. So it was around this time. Okay, so Rahu was about 11 degrees. So you see, as Rahu was getting closer to his ascendant, I think this is since then is really when he's just gotten really off. And like his shows are about this, so much about this sort of conspiracy around this whole thing now, so much since then. And his tone has changed so much. He's not the objective. He's not the objective. It's not the objective person that he sort of used to be. So again, I think since that time, it really kind of shifted. But look at where we're at right now. Look at where Rahu is right now. And again, astrology shows this stuff, man. Here's where we are right now. Boom, 454, 129. Look at his ascendant, 224. Watch those exact degrees, baby. Look at what's coming. Rahu's going like, So it was like here. Let me get in the camera. It was like here. Then he's going here, 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 here. Now it's like right here. And look, if we push this forward a month, look, boom. With it, by this time next month, Rahu will have crossed his ascendant. I wonder if Rogan's going to last Spotify through the month. I have a feeling again, honestly, when I do these updates, I haven't spent a whole lot of time like researching Spotify and the company and this and that. I just called this up to see if we had a good chart for Rogan, and I saw that we did. I looked at a few things, and then I pop this on and grab a few dates here. As you see, I'm even just looking things up now. But I looked at it also mainly because Rahu is then going to go within 2 months. Look, it's going to be by the time this is a month from now. And then by the end of March, Rahu is going to be here. It's going to be in his 6th and 12th houses. Rahu will be going over his natal Rahu, and Ketu going over his natal Ketu and going through the 6-12 axis. And I think he is really going to, it's very possible that he could have a big loss. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more, by the way, there was also the loss in Spotify stock and whatnot has gone down. I wouldn't be surprised if Spotify starts feeling a lot more of the pressure to maybe do something, or maybe tell him he's got to cool this stuff out or chill this stuff out. I mean, just imagine, if you will, that more and more artists start saying, we want our music off of Spotify. Again, it's easy to snicker about it now because it's just, oh, Neil Young, some old man, Joni Mitchell, who cares? Aside from the fact that they're great artists. But again, what if it's more? Again, think of what if Paul McCartney says it? What if Eric Clapton wouldn't? He's very much sympathetic to all this probably. But think of other artists that are activists. Again, it's not coming to my mind, but it's not like, I think Barry Manilow, who was it? I saw a few others. They're older artists, but again, it could be more and more, and it could also just be a sort of PR hit. And this kind of public relations is the thing that these companies now really are sensitive to. Excuse me. And again, and look, he just had Jordan Peterson on, and he and Jordan Peterson are sitting there, and Jordan Peterson is just like, again, like musing about climate change, is utterly incoherent ramble about climate change that was, again, I don't even know what he was trying to say. It was the most incoherent psychobabble I have heard. He's like, well, they're measuring things, but then they measure everything. So if you're measuring everything, you're really measuring nothing. And if you're, this whole kind of thing where it's like, what is he even talking about? And Rogan is just sitting there going, while Jordan Peterson is just making no sense, just so he can somehow undermine climate science. And by the way, this is a big change, because go back and look at Google Rogan, what's her name? Candace Owens and climate. Rogan, Candace Owens, and climate. He had Candace Owens on a couple years ago, this conservative woman, and she started talking about climate change, and she wasn't making any sense. And Rogan pushed back. I mean, he wasn't rude, but he was like, yeah, but you can't say, yeah, but you're talking about 1% of 1% of 1% of scientists when you're saying that. I mean, you don't really think climate change isn't real, do you? Because 1% of scientists say it's not. You don't really think that, do you? I mean, he was like, he was kind of shaming her for that. I mean, and the thing she was saying wasn't anywhere near as incoherent as what Jordan Peterson was just saying. Jordan Peterson was just basically looking for any kind of way to undermine climate. I mean, he didn't even have anything literal to say. He was just saying, well, but what they do is they have a set of parameters where they're measuring anything. They say anything can lead to climate change. Well, if you're saying anything, then you're basically saying nothing. You're saying everything can do it. So if you're saying everything, then what are you measuring? You're not measuring anything. It was literally, that was almost the literal argument Jordan Peterson was making as a way to undermine what the scientists are saying. And Rogan's just going, like, instead of, I mean, how can you not push back against something like that? I mean, anyone in the common sense would have said, but what are you talking about? I mean, can you be more specific? I don't know, anything. Say anything. You don't just let someone float that as a rebuttal against climate science and the scientists. First of all, it's not true. And it's also obviously clear that Jordan Peterson just didn't know what he was talking about. They have parameters. It's just silly. But again, Rogan, no pushback, because I guess because he likes Jordan Peterson, or I don't know, whatever the reason. So, but again, it's too important of an issue. Now we're talking about climate science. Now, what is Rogan going to come out and be against climate science, against climate change, or whatever? So again, that there's so much that that has shifted with his parameters here. And again, I'm looking at the astrology as well with this. Obviously, that's the point of this. And I'm just bringing some of this out because we can see the Rahu is right on his ascendant right now. And I'm sorry, but he's definitely not as like, he's like, he looks like he's just kind of flailing. I mean, again, a couple of weeks ago, he came out and had to apologize because he was embarrassed. And people were like, yeah, finally, Joe, finally, someone called you out to your face about something dumb you said. Why don't you have some of these other scientists on there? By the way, think about this. He has Malone on. He has McCullough on. When he had Sanjay Gupta on, by the way, Sanjay Gupta was correcting him the whole time. But also, and, have these other scientists on who refute what Malone says and what McCullough says and what Brett Weinstein and these other people have them on there and let them tell you why you're wrong. You want to have conversations, bring the other side on. Oh, he's not going to do that. He had one guy on who was friendly to him, and the guy in real time fact checked him about myocarditis with kids or something like that, where Rogan had it totally wrong. And Rogan has been saying this stuff about how if you get the vaccine, you're 60% more likely to get myocarditis or something, statistically, blah, blah, which is completely not true. And this person knew it. And he said, no, you have it completely wrong. You're like 20 times more likely to get myocarditis if you get COVID, not if you get the vaccine. And so Rogan even had to admit, he admitted, oh, you're right, I'm sorry, I do my best, blah, blah. And people said, yeah, why don't you learn from this? Like, yeah, you used to be a lot better. Why don't you learn from this now going forward? And within 2 days, he was up there defending himself again, at least on Twitter. Then he retweeted people who actually defended him to say, yeah, see, I was right after all. So again, this is the kind of Rahu. This is what Rahu can do. And for him, we're seeing it very publicly because he's become so public. And so since Rahu went into his first house, right when the Spotify deal started, Jupiter Rahu, or no, I'm sorry, what am I saying? Saturn Jupiter, excuse me. Saturn Jupiter, he signed the deal with Spotify right before it. And then in September 2020, it started. And then right after that, Rahu went into his first house. So that whole time, you see, he's been gaining in popularity, and he's like the most popular one. Also becoming much more of a Rahu-like figure. He's been much more polarized. But now you see these last couple months, that thing that just happened was about a month ago. It was earlier this year, actually a couple weeks ago. Again, and now his, what many call sort of misinformation, or at least just kind of not here's the way I see it, is that he's just not being responsible. He's not being even. He's not being he's lost credibility. And before, he actually had a lot of credibility with me as well. I mean, like I say, I think he's probably a pretty good guy underneath it all. I think he's literally just kind of asking questions and trying to get to the best version of something. But I think something kind of snapped, particularly when he got it. And then he felt the mainstream media, or he became kind of a villain, and people started saying, oh, this idiot taking horse dewormer, and oh, he's just an idiot. And I think since then he's been pissed, and he's not been, and he's kind of, he's got a score to settle a little bit now. And he's like, yeah, the score is, I'm not an idiot. This stuff does work. And you guys is a conspiracy, and you're doing this and blah, 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 blah. So, but it's happening very publicly. So if nothing else, aside from what you might think of, I'm just saying the stuff that happened. And again, some people always get mad at me when I don't cooperate with what they think I should cooperate. Like, oh, he's right, it is a conspiracy, or this or that. I don't care. I'm just actually reporting the way I see it of what's happened. These are things that have happened. And but as Rahu gets closer to the ascendant here, and it goes over, I think it's very possible that they might part ways with him. You're looking at the same transit I am. You're looking at the same transit. Rahu is going over that ascendant. And again, then it's going to go over this 12th house, and Ketu is going to go over the 12th house, Ketu, Moon, Mars. Again, it's not the best transit, and he's going to start the Moon dasha. He's going to start Mercury dasha at the beginning of next year. Now, again, the Mercury dasha is going to be pretty powerful. I'm not saying he's going to go away. I'm not even saying for sure this will happen, but you're definitely seeing the effects here, and it could definitely show, particularly like as we get a little later in the year. Again, we're going to have eclipses up here in this Rahu, Rahu Mars is going to come up here. This is like right around the eclipse in April, and so these are some pretty intense transits. You can really see the rise and fall here, big gains and potentially big losses here. And his Mercury dasha again is going to be kind of interesting as well. He's got Mercury in the third house. All this third house stuff has to do with things like media and communication. You see, he's got Mercury, Sun, Jupiter there. Those three planets. So this is why he's very much a media figure, and so you can really see that in his nature to talk. But again, kind of it's in Cancer. He's kind of emotional, and again you could see. Look, Joe Rogan reminds me of a lot of guys that I know. I mean, he's like the bro that you sit around and BS with. Everybody. He knows everybody. He likes everybody. Everybody likes him. That's why he's like the kind of, what do they say, like the bro whisperer or something. The bro spirituality. The kind of kicking it back with the bro who sort of calls you out, and then but underneath it all, you sort of y'all like each other, but you're kind of laughing and hanging out. And again, I think that's what's underneath it all, and I think it's very sincere. But again, I think this Rahu, especially as Rahu got after a while, and again, it'd be interesting to see those transits. It said he got, let me go back and look actually at right when he got that COVID, because I think that's really what has sent him off a little bit. That was beginning of September. So it literally even said September 1st, Instagram said he felt weird on Saturday night and got tested. Yeah, so he announced on September 1st that he got COVID. So the transits, of course, as we have this here. Oh, this is when we had all those oppositions. We had all those oppositions that had just happened. We went through all those oppositions. This was also right around the time when that Brian Laundrie and the girl, that whole kind of odyssey was going on. Those young kids who the girl died. I forgot their names. But it was around that time where we had all those oppositions in the summer. This is when it started. So again, we have Saturn, Mars. Okay, yeah. So we had that combustion was going on when it happened. So it was during this time. So then, a couple weeks after, this was when I think he just this was when he, got really, angry about this stuff. And, when Sun and Mars. Oh yeah, this was during that Mars combustion time. Yeah, and so since then, but he in the Mercury dasha though, he could also have, again, Mercury rules the second and the fifth houses, and Mercury also rules this Saturn in the 11th house. This is why I said, even in the introduction to this video, I was like, so is he going to lose the Spotify thing? And then I said, president. You never know. I mean, I think he's very ambitious, and the Mercury dasha could be pretty powerful. I'm not saying that he'll be president, but for kind of public ambitions, especially because Mercury rules this Saturn in the 11th house, this 9th and 10th ruler in the 11th house. And God, I mean, now we live in a country where, media personalities are leading political figures. Who knows? I mean, he could be a figure that is a sort of transcendent political figure. Think if he ran for president. Do you think he would have a fighting chance? Hell yeah. He would be a great crossover candidate. I'm not saying he would do it, but he'd be formidable. There's no question about it. Whether it's with Spotify or not, he's already become a very transcendent figure, right? So I think we're going to see whether he gets removed from Spotify or not, I think we're going to see more of this pressure. The other thing I also wanted to mention, and I wouldn't rule this out, because this is also the thing about Rogan that I think underneath it all, again, I feel like I know this guy. I mean, I think all guys think they know this guy. Like, I think I know what he's about. I wouldn't be surprised if, I bet you right now he's even doing it, trying to get Neil Young on his podcast. It would be a gangster move. I wouldn't be surprised if he did it. It would be a good move. And I bet you he's going to come out. I'm sure he's going to talk about it, but I bet you he's going to come out and be really cool toward Neil Young, because I think that's probably very sincere. And he'll probably come out, maybe even say, you know what, I feel bad, or I'm sorry. Not I'm sorry for, he's not going to be sorry for his show or his conversations, but just that it's not his intention to do that or something. And he loves Neil Young. He'd love to talk to Neil Young. He idolizes Neil Young. He thinks Neil Young is great, blah, blah, blah. Totally gangster move to have Neil Young on. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. And I wouldn't be surprised if Neil Young did it too. And then maybe they even put him back on Spotify or something. Who knows? Well, actually, I don't think that'll happen. I think if anything, Neil Young wouldn't do it. Neil Young wouldn't do it, but I bet you Joe Rogan will do it, or he would come out and say, I'd love to have him on the show. I completely wouldn't be shocked. That's what I think. I can predict something like that, I think, would happen. I don't think Neil Young would do it, because Neil Young is, no matter what people think, again, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, these people, again, it's funny how those who are talking about how, well, Neil Young, I thought he was for free speech, and like how he's become the establishment and whatnot. Yeah, it's completely the opposite. Neil Young doing this is the rebellion in action. It's not about, if anything, Spotify, and it is the thing that Neil Young is saying, I don't want my music on your platform, even though you give me money. Screw the money. I don't need the money. I don't need your money. I don't want to be on this platform. It's about as gangsta as it gets in that context. Yeah, maybe you don't agree with the principle, because maybe you think, free speech to get up and confuse everybody about vaccines is something that everybody should just think is okay. Again, whether I agree with Neil Young in principle or not, that's not the point. By the way, I'll be honest with you, I don't care. I don't have a problem with Rogan doing that, or I don't think it should be, quote, first of all, it's not censorship. Censorship is from the government. Censorship means that Joe Rogan isn't going to, or that Dr. Malone, or these people, or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., they're not getting thrown in jail for their speech. That's what the First Amendment protects, that you can say what you want and not get thrown in jail for it. Okay. That's the government's right of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't extend to, and you get to use, and every company and every platform owes you their platform to get up and say anything you want at any time. Okay. That's not what the free speech is about. These are companies that, and platforms that have the right to say, I don't want to platform that speech. I don't want my platform to be used to advance that message. That's not censorship, nor is it censored. No. So again, it might come out that way when Neil Young says, well, I don't want to be on this platform where this is your big, this is the big kahuna amplifying this misinformation. And then Neil Young says, I don't want to be on that platform. Again, yeah, it can come out like Neil Young is trying to censor Joe Rogan. But what would you have Neil Young do? What would you have these artists do? By the way, I can empathize. Maybe, those of you out here who have a voice and who have a platform. I've been invited to do many things before. that I don't do because I don't want to be associated with the platform. I don't want to be on it. I don't want to be speaking at a panel where it's me and other people saying things that I don't want to be associated with. Not because they're bad people, frankly, in that context, but sometimes it is also stuff where, I've been invited to talk about things because people have these ideas about astrology. One time I was asked to do this thing, and the other people were like literally stuff like satanic stuff and whatever. It's like, I'm not going to be on the same stage with that. I don't want to do it. And by the way, if people like that were platforming my work and I saw it, I would say, take it off. I don't want to be on that. Now, and if they didn't, I'd say, well, either take them off or take me off. What are you left to? What are you left to say at that point? He didn't just say take it off. He said, if you're going to have that on there, then take me off. And I'm sure he knew that they were going to then take him off just as a matter of principle. Somebody goes to Spotify and says, get rid of them or get rid of me, then the company's usually going to say, okay, we'll get rid of you then, just because of the fact that you're trying to bully us. So I can understand why Spotify did it. I can understand why Neil Young did it. And I can understand why Joe Rogan's doing what he's doing. Sometimes the truth is messy. Sometimes nobody's wrong. It's just things taking care of themselves. So I can see all of it. And by the way, this is a hard thing in the world. Everybody has to make somebody wrong. Everybody's a villain. Somebody's a villain. In many ways, this is just this is what free speech looks like. It's not just your free speech. It's everybody's speech. That includes the company has a right to do it. Rogan has a right to do it. The company has a right to get rid of Rogan. The artists have a right to ask to get taken off if they want. Again, this is what it looks like. Sometimes it's messy. And again, but the one pervasive attitude that I have seen is people acting like Neil Young and now Joni Mitchell are going against, funny how all these 60s hippies who were rebelling against the man now want to silence Joe Rogan, now want to censor him. That's not what it is. They're not trying to censor him. They don't want to be associated with the platform where now they're being associated with this thing that they don't agree with. And again, they're rebelling against the man being Spotify. They're like, I don't care if you give us money. I mean, they're losing money here. Money, the big thing. They're like, the hell with the money. There's a principle here. So again, whatever, I'm just bringing that part of it out as well. And again, just imagine if a bunch of other artists start doing it. What winds up happening then is pressure, because Spotify's feeling pressure now. And what I think is frankly really badass about what Neil Young and Joni Mitchell are doing, whether I agree with it or not. By the way, if I were on Spotify and I had a platform, I'd probably do the same thing, just out of principle, in the context of, you know what, I don't think this is helpful, and especially in this day and age right now, this is the kind of divisiveness, especially that isn't really that helpful. And again, platforming that and having that be the most prominent voice, that Spotify should know that if that's going to be the face of your company and you're going to make all this money off of it and all of this stuff, then, you're going to have to bear that cross. But, whether or not, they actually remove him from the platform or maybe have to, censor him a little bit, again, we'll see what happens. But there's going to be this pressure coming for sure, because we can see that in his chart with these transits as well. And then by the time of the spring, by the time we get to March and into March, it might look pretty different. So anyway, I think it's very interesting. Very interesting case study. And I was just sitting here, I was finishing up some work and thought I would make this quick video. I think it's pretty fascinating. And, I hope, frankly, the other thing I hope is that the pressure comes, and I even kind of have a feeling about this, that Rogan, I wouldn't be surprised if Rogan, maybe they're having some conversations even at Spotify, and Rogan is really thinking like, Yeah, am I getting a little out of my thing here? Is this really what I want to do? And that there might not be a statement where he's not going to apologize for having the conversations, but maybe realize maybe some of the stuff that I said here, like, yeah, maybe I'm lost a little bit of perspective. And now I got legends like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell saying, I don't want to be associated with this if you're letting this guy go on. Because Joe Rogan can't, in his right mind, believe that, Neil Young and these other people are just unreasonable, crazy people. They're not. These guys have been around forever, that, everybody is just out to censor people. Again, there's a point where if you're a thoughtful person, and I think Rogan is, I think he's a thoughtful person, he'll at least look at his actions a little bit. He's got this moon in Libra as well. He's got Chitra. I get along well with the Chitras. Got these moon in Libra, Venus and Leo. We get along pretty well. Saturn and Pisces. By the way, I've contacted the Rogan show before about going on there and letting him pummel me about astrology. I've written him and said, I can prove to you that Vedic astrology, that it's a science. So I've seen you talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson and others about how astrology is a lot of nonsense. Have me on. I guarantee you I will be able to show you otherwise. Go ahead, have me on and torture me for hours if you want. I'd like to see you try. Come on, do it. Do it. I call him out. Come on, bro. Come at me, bro. Come on. And by the way, if you know Rogan or you can get at him, show him this. I dare him. I dare you, Joe. Come on, Joe. You think you're tough? You think astrology is just BS? You think you're so smart? Come on. It's just pseudoscience. By the way, bring Neil deGrasse Tyson on too. You and Neil deGrasse Tyson against me. Any day, I'll have you both crying. You will be on the floor. I will ruin your career, particularly Neil deGrasse Tyson. I will ruin him. Come on. Do it. Come at me, bro. Come on. You think you're tough? You ain't seen tough. That's right. Now we're getting down to it. Anyway, it's true. I've emailed them several times. I've wanted to send him my book. I'm like, come on, man. By the way, and I did this because I know he's open and we'd have a long conversation. And, I've seen many of his podcasts before where he talks about his experiences with spirituality and all that stuff. He's like a lot of people. He's a decent guy and he's experimented with things, beyond the matrix and stuff, but people don't know how this stuff works. His experiences have come from like hallucinogenics, ayahuasca kind of stuff. And that's just a kind of doorway, but he doesn't understand that, those Vedic teachings are you're not creating anything with those psychedelics. You're just removing some layers of ego that these sciences align with. So it would be easy for me to like have him go, oh, okay, I get it. Because I can tell he's a sensible guy. He's a sensible guy. He's just lost it for a while there. And this is why this Rahu is just, it's kind of tripped him out. And I think he's like, okay, I'm kind of losing it here. So, this is, you're damn right it would. I'd love it. Boy, I'd love it. Particularly some scientists, Neil deGrasse Tyson or Joe, what's his name? The science guy. Bring him on. And I don't want any other astrologers there either. I don't want to deal with that. Me against these people. Oh, it would be awesome. It would be great. I'd have them crying. Okay, you win. Oh yeah, it would be beautiful. So anyway, if you like this, I just want to do the like, share, subscribe thing too as well. Again, make comments on the video and share it and like it. It means, then other people will see it. It gets higher in the rankings and stuff like that. And again, like I said before, you can get the 2022 forecast for your sign. This is really a great way to have me, be your guide all year, so to speak. We have some things coming up. We have this Venus now moving direct. Then we're going to have the nodes change signs, and we're going to have Jupiter moving to Pisces. So this is really a big year. It's not that much to just, stay informed. And so again, interesting case study. I like Joe Rogan. I always have. I think he's a good guy. I think he's just sideways now. His Rahu transit, man. I think it's just like the stuff is real, and he's in transition between between Saturn and Mercury dasha. So again, it's also a transitional time, and that Saturn Jupiter, it really thrust him in this role of being this like inspiring figure. Again, you can also see that in the Saturn Jupiter. Again, I didn't get to much more, but just real quick, I forgot to say it. But Saturn Jupiter again is also just that inspiring figure. Look at how he's become such a Jupiterian figure, like this leader, this inspiring figure, this not Messiah, but people. Jupiter is literally that kind of leader. Look at how he's become this thrust into this big leadership role because his Jupiter is in Cancer, right? Very powerfully in its exalted sign. It's also the ruler of that Saturn. And also in his D10, he's got Jupiter moon in the 10th house, right? And he's in, so again, Saturn, Jupiter, Saturn rules the ascendant. That's why his career has gone through the roof and the whole Saturn dasha, and Saturn is in the 5th, very powerful Raja Yoga planet here in his career. Again, Mercury dasha, Mercury's in the 6th house. It's in Gemini, but it's quite a bit different. So again, when I look at this, his Mercury dasha might not be as good as his Saturn. He might be, running the high point here right now, or about to lose it, frankly, if he's not careful. But again, you can see Saturn, powerful Raja Yoga here, and Saturn, Jupiter. Jupiter winds up going in the 10th house with the moon. This, Gajakeshwari Yoga here in the 10th house. Again, that's why he's been a public figure, a leader, an inspiring figure for all those, for all that time. And the moon is also Vargotama here. So again, I think he's a good guy. I think he's really kind of lost his way a little bit. And I honestly hope he gets it back a little bit, because I think it's good to have voices out there, bringing out decent information like he was before. I mean, the whole pandemic was all that time he was putting stuff out there, but it was okay. It's just the last couple. Just notice it. It's since he got it that he just kind of went haywire, and just started really platforming this stuff and really losing objectivity. So let's hope he gets it back a little bit for all our sake, because he's a leading voice, and he's the bro. He's the bro whisperer. All right, folks. And by the way, you might see me on there one day, and I swear I'll have them weeping.